Hey everyone, Mitch coming from the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So on this episode, well, more exciting spoilers and a commander that is very unique and had me saying, wait, what? It does that? Nothing else does that. Nothing does that. What in the world is going on with this? Let's jump into it. So, first up, Portent of Calamity, a sorcery for X and a blue. Via the top X card to your library for each card type. You may exile a card of that type from among them. Put the rest in your graveyard. You may cast a spell from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. If you exiled 4 more cards this way, then put the rest of the exiled cards in your hand. So, this is an interesting card. It is sorcery speed, and that really does hold it up. That being said, if you've got like a big mana deck or like, you know, X spelled tribal deck essentially, yeah, I could definitely see this one seeing play because, I mean, you throw 4 mana in there essentially, I guess, technically, so it's like you have to hit the right things off the top, right, for it actually to be exiling 4 different card types. So keep that in mind. That being said, at the least you could put 4 in there and, you know, 5 mana in total and cast something off the top of your library for free and get some extra things in your hand. It's an interesting card for sure because there's definitely some potential whiffing. Yeah, I mean, if you've got a variety of card types in the deck, you could hit a couple different things. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely could see some play for the right strategy out there. Again, big mana, X tribal. Let's move on. Next up, Bellowing Crier, a 2/1 Frog Advisor for 2 mana in blue. Enters, draw a card, then discard a card. ETB loot. You can probably guess what it's going to see play in. ETBs. Yeah, and a deck that really uses ETBs. There's a lot of blink decks out there. Those can utilize something like this quite well. I guess Advisors could too. That is a tribal deck potentially. And ones that I guess care about looting specifically. Decks that care about discarding. Decks that care about their graveyard, etc., etc. It's a low to the ground. Pretty good ETB right there. Next up, Druid of the Spade, a 2/3 Rabbit Druid for 3 mana in green. As long as you control a token, it gets +2/+0 and has trample. Limited card. Next up, we've got Tree Guard Duo, a 3/4 Frog Rabbit for 4 mana in green. Enters until end of your turn. Until end of turn, I should say. Target creature you control gains Vigilance and gets +X/+X for the number of creatures you control. I mean, a go-wide strategy could utilize this one. It's kind of interesting because it's a great pump effect, but also, like, if it's go-wide plus, like, your commander could, like, be a factor in it and getting through, sure. Yeah, I mean, just for like a regular go-wide strategy, it's kind of tough to like take pieces out of that. When this one doesn't go wide itself, it just kind of helps you like be like a good finisher. And if it's not helping finish, it's not really helping with a lot. Next up, Alania's Pathmaker, a 4/2 Otter Wizard for 4 mana in red. When it enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You play that card. I mean, yeah, just impulse draw right there. It's an ETB that, like, maybe you'll include this potentially in a blink deck. Maybe you'll include it in a deck that revolves around, like, impulse draw, but there's definitely better impulse draw out there. Next up, Blooming Blast, instant for 2 mana in red. Gift a treasure. Interesting. 2 damage to our creature if they give us promise. Deals 3 damage to that creature controller. Yeah, more of a limited card probably. Like, it is nice. I mean, maybe like in a deck that really cares about like burninating things. Like, sure, you can take out a small creature and also burninate an opponent in the face by giving someone a treasure. That's not nothing. So, here we go. Next up, Fountain Port. A land. Tap for a colorless. Pay 2 tap, sacrifice a token, draw a card. Interesting. Pay 3 and tap, pay 1 life, create a 1/1 blue fish creature token. Pay 4 and tap, create a treasure token. So, a lot of good options there. I mean, I think if you revolve around tokens and you're running like a 1/2 color deck essentially, yeah, you could throw another one of those, you know, utility lands in there. You might be able to sneak into a 3 color deck essentially too. But yeah, a good way to, I mean, at the very least, to sacrifice tokens to draw cards. Creating a treasure is not all that efficient, obviously, but like if you got extra mana lying around, you can. Technically, when you have these like abilities on this land, like keep in mind you have to tap the land itself, so you're like losing out on the mana that this land produces. But, yeah, so, I mean, it would be, like, kind of like 3 in total, 4 in total, 5 in total. So it's like 5 to make 1 treasure, kind of. That being said, yeah, for decks that really revolve around those things, or for decks that revolve around, you know, getting tokens out to play, sacrificing them to draw cards would be quite nice. Yeah, I think it'd be a decent deck. So, yeah, token tribal decks, go wide decks, clue decks, food decks, etc., etc. Next up, and here we are. Eluge? No idea. The Shoreless Sea. That is some really cool art. A star elemental fish that looks like a dinosaur of some sorts, But apparently there aren't dinosaurs in Bloomburrow, but there is a dragon. Wizards, stop with the dragon shenanigans. For 4 mana in blue. That is 1 blue, blue, blue. So pretty specific mana value, but again, you're going to be able to cast it. You're in a mono blue deck. Power and toughness each equal to the number of islands you control. Whenever it enters or attacks, you get a flood counter on target land. It's an island in addition to its other types for as long as there's a flood counter on it. Wizards. All right, we'll talk about that here in a little bit, okay? The first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs blue or 1 less to cast for each land you control with a flood counter on it. That is something that I kind of skipped over when I was first reading it. I was just like, la, 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 first instant, yeah, it costs 1 less to cast. Kind of skipped over that first, blue part, and I was like, wait. This can reduce not just generic mana value, which typically whenever you have, those Goblin Electromancer type things, it's typically almost always, pretty much always, generic mana value. This can reduce the blue pips in a cost as well, meaning you probably can cast quite a few things for free. And again, it's on every single turn, not just your own. So the first card that you're casting, it's in sorcery, you get to cast it for reduced or even free potentially on any turn. Whoa. I mean, on a turn, for instance. Yeah, that seems quite powerful, and it is very specific, though, on, how this entire thing's worded, right? Because, first of all, the first thing is, okay, number of islands you control. It doesn't care if those are regular islands or ones that have flood counters on them. Cool, it can get bigger based off of that. The second one is enters or attacks, so ETB, which is very easy to abuse in blue. Attack, not as easy to use and abuse. That being said, it can be a really heavy hitter, so you're probably going to want to attack anyways. Flood counters on target land. I guess I'll bring this up now, but there have been flood counters in the past. We'll talk about a card here in a bit about it, but used to be if something had a flood counter on it, that was just an island. Your land, which was probably a command tower or something like that, is now just an island, and I have hurt you because you're oh, I don't even have blue in this deck. You're basically blood mooning me very slowly. Yes, I'm gonna flood all your lands. And they kind of went away from that, which might be a good thing, but yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. So, putting on your opponent's lands probably doesn't make that much sense, because you're just being okay, it's also an island. Unless you got Island Walk synergies in the deck, then it does, I guess, for that. But yeah, giving your opponent's islands probably doesn't matter all that much, because it doesn't change the land. It's hey, it's also an island. They're thank you for helping me fix mana, I guess? Thanks. Yeah, it doesn't really erase the land. That being said, you're going to be probably targeting your own lands. And then when it comes to the last thing, the first in-source spell you cast at each turn costs it less for each land you control with a flood counter on it. So again, another reason why you're probably going to be targeting your own things. There's no downside to your opponents when they have flood counters on theirs, number one. And number two, you want flood counters on yours so it can reduce the cost of your own instant sorceries quite a bit. At a certain point, once you build things up enough, your instant sorceries, 1 on each turn, will be free, which can be quite nice. So yeah, this is a heavy-hitting commander that can give you a lot of free value throughout the game, and yeah, it's pretty interesting, for sure. So yeah, and there's some island synergies you can work with as well. Let's jump into some cards that work really well with this one. Again, there's some really off-the-wall weird cards that work well with it, and also some strategies that can be quite powerful that work well with it too, so let's jump into those. So, first up, an aptly named card, Aquatech's Will. Not Architect, Aquatech. A tribal sorcery merfolk for a blue mana. Put a flood counter on target land. The land is an island of other types as long as it has a flood counter on it. Again, this one is other types. We'll talk about a card here in a little bit that is not that. If you control a merfolk, draw a card. You might. If you do, great. If not, it's just another way to get an extra flood counter on one of your lands to speed up the process of reducing the cost of your spells. Next up, the Flood of Mars. 3/3 Island Walk. There you go. There's a reason to put a flood counter on an opponent's land, okay? Whenever the Flood of Mars attacks, play flood counter on another target creature or land. If it's a creature, becomes a copy of the Flood of Mars. If it's a land, becomes an island of other type. So you can make extra copies of this, which is quite nice. But you also could just give, your flood counters to your lands to ensure that you can actually, keep reducing the cost of your spells. The first one you might want to put on an opponent's land just so you can get this through consistently with that unblockability thing. So Island Walk. Next up, though, Blink effects. Blink effects are probably the way that you're going to use and abuse this commander the most when it comes to spreading out those flood counters. Blur, instant for 3 mana, also a band. Song 2. Exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under someone's control, draw a card. So again, a blink effect can be amazing with this commander because it's just another, hey, get another flood counter on something, great, reduce the cost of your instant sorceries further. And especially with something like this where it's an inefficiently costed blink effect for the most part, Usually they blink. I mean, you'd love for them in blue to cost 1. Typically, like other than Essence Flux, they don't. They cost 2 or more. This one costs 3, and you're like, okay, but it draws me a card. But with this commander, again, this can just be straight up free. So it's like, yeah, freely make my commander draw a card. Great, good for me. Next up, and I am counting this in the budget buys because it is technically under $1 because gold border cards, every single play group and every single person LGSs I've ever played with have always been okay with them. Technically, rules committee, they are not allowed in Commander because no reason. Anyways, it's legal to me. So, yeah, I mean, use them, please. Thank you. 90 cents. Instant speed. Counter target spell. Counter spell. This is the only actually copy of counter spell that's actually under $1 right now. Still, to me, budget friendly. That being said, one thing that you could do with this deck is kind of like build your own Jin Gataxias-ish, where it's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, the first spell you cast each turn is countered. I mean, if you have counter spells. What I should say is essentially, you can freely cast counter spells with this commander quite easily. Again, you literally just have to get like 2, maybe 3 for some counter spells, you know, on 2 flood counters, I should say, on your lands. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, cool. Ha ha ha. Oh, you're gonna play your spell? Oh, I'm tapped out. Oh no. Counter. Haha. Next turn. Oh no. Counter. Yeah, so you can do some pretty obnoxious things with this commander. You don't have to go in that direction, but if you're playing against this commander, I'd be on the lookout for if that player's tapped out, you don't always have, you know, the green light to go ahead and cast a spell because it might get countered, okay? Next up. At higher levels of mana, obviously, or higher levels of flood counters, I should say, Mystic Confluence. Instant for 5 mana. Choose 3. Choose save mode more than once. Counter target spell's controller pays 3. Bounce a creature back to its owner's hand or draw a card. All great modes, but yeah, basically, potentially a free counterspell on something, and then also draw 2. So yeah, once you get things going, once you get things set up, your engine can be absolutely absurd. So yeah, really building in a lot of instants, I think, is what you'd probably want to do with this commander because yeah, you want to be able to play not just on your turn with your instant sorceries. You want to play and do 3 instants, obviously, is what I'm saying. On your opponent's turns as well. Being able to play, instead of just 1 free spell with each trip on the table, you can play 4, essentially, again. Next up, Engulf the Shore. Speaking of a great instant. 4 mana in blue. Return to their owner's hands all creatures with a toughness less than or equal to the number of islands you control, which is kind of ironic with this commander because it's like, as long as you have 1 land that is not an island, you know, have flood counter on it, or is actually an island, then your commander gets underneath this because it's the number of islands -1 then, I guess. But yeah, being able to bounce all your opponent's creatures for the most part at instant speed while keeping your commander there can be quite beneficial. And again, this commander could like Voltron win. I mean, if you give like Fire Trigger to your commander like Double Strike, you've got ways where you can take your opponents out quite quickly with this one. Next up, Flow of Knowledge. Instant speed for 5 mana in blue. Draw a card for each island you control, then discard 2 cards. Again, this counts all your islands, plus all the ones with flood counters on them too. So probably all your lands at a certain point. So yeah, being able to just draw a ton of cards at instant speed. Oh, you know, you lose 2 cards. Who cares? And you probably freely cast this. That's absolutely lovely. Once you get the value engine going, it's going to be hard to stop. Scourge of Fleet's another great island-based card. 6/6 for 7 mana Kraken. Enters the battlefield. Return each creature opponent's control of toughness X less owner's hands or X number of islands you control. This one you don't have to worry about your own creatures. It's just bouncing your opponent's creatures. That can be quite good. Especially if you have like a bounce effect. You can bring this back to your hand. Or yes, blink effects, which already work amazing with this commander again. You're just like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll cast Blur. Blink this. Oh, bounce your board again. Haha. Swing out with my commander. Speed of swinging through with your commander. Rogue's Passage. They land, they can tap for colors, pay 4, tap target creature can be blocked this turn. Your commander can hit for a ton, obviously, so it's quite nice. Also on top of that, again, keep in mind, yeah, even though this doesn't help with mana fixing, this will, once your commander's in play, because you can be like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, cool, give it a flood counter. All right, you're also an island. Tap for a blue, and I need you to. Next up, Temple of the False God. I never recommend this card for, like, any deck ever, except for, like, 99 lands, okay? I really don't recommend this card in many decks out there, and I think it's overplayed. That being said, it could work in this deck because it is a land that can tap for 2, only if you got 5 or more lands. That being said, you still need to, like, ramp probably to get your commander out, and then play this, and then maybe you're short on mana. So again, it's like the situations where it's like you're turning a land that can't do something potentially into a land that is also an island, so it can just tap for a blue when you need it to. That's great. So this one, I will like give a slight recommendation where like, I'll give you the go ahead. I probably wouldn't include it in my own deck because there's going to be opportunities where it's like, oh, yeah, it's just a dead land in play and I can't cast my commander. This is unfortunate. But in other, you know, for players who are a bit less risk averse with this card, go ahead, go for it, okay? But yes, there are a lot of different lands that are utility you can consider as well on top of this one too. Moving on to the pricier picks, though, and again, a reminder, all these cards are in the card list link in the description below, so check that out if you're interested in this commander. The first one that came to my mind is actually Quicksilver Fountain, which is why I kept talking about flood counters in a different way. Artifact 4/3. Rule players out there, help me out here on how this all will work. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, the player puts a flood counter on target non-island land they control. That land is an island as long as they have a flood counter on it. At end of turn, if all lands are islands, remove all flood counters from them. So this one's a bit weird because, again, this is how flood counters originally were, I think, right? This is before Lorwyn, I believe. Yeah, it's before Lorwyn. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but I believe it's before Lorwyn. So essentially, flood counters used to be, that's an island. Nothing else. It loses its other types. It's not anything else. It's just an island. So I am essentially ruining your mana base. Kind of like, Blood Moon-ish. But very slowly, and also, also helping myself. So this is where you can definitely use this for this commander. It's a little risky because, again, like, once all lands have flood counters on them, or, are islands essentially, then all the flood counters go away. And that includes, I would assume, the other flood counters that you have that your commander is giving them. But yeah, rules lawyers out there, please help me. Like, are you supposed to keep track of, like, which flood counters were given by the Quicksilver Fountain and which are given by your commander, because those flood counters interact in different ways, one making them an island and one making them an island-ish to other types? Let me know, because I think this is weird. Anyways, moving on. Roaming Throne. Yeah, this card's good with so many things. 4/4 Golem Ward 2 for 4. Didn't need Ward 2, Wizards. Enters battlefield, choose a creature type. Elemental or fish, whatever you want to pick. Chosen type, it's the chosen type of just other types. If a triggered ability of another creature control, the chosen type triggers additional time. So that triggers on the ETB and on the attack trigger for your commander. Basically, double up the flood counters that you are dishing out. Next up, speaking of that, Virtue of Knowledge, an enchantment for 5 mana. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers additional time. So again, on ETB only, basically Panharmonic on that too would work well. But yes, that would be doubling up your commander's ETB, which again, if you're building around Blink heavily, that can really help you out. On top of that, it's got an adventure for 2 mana, instant speed, copy target activator triggered ability control, choose targets with the copy. Again, you can copy that or something else if you need to. Next up, Displacer Kit. And speaking of a triggered ability, oh my goodness, 2/2 Cat Beast for 4 mana in blue. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, that returns to the battlefield under zone control. Keep blinking. Just keep blinking again and again and again and again a ton throughout the game with your commander. So again, every single one of your instant sorceries now is just basically, okay, yeah, on that turn for an instant, I should say instance, on my opponent's turn, I cast it for free. Cool, yay. Oh, I also blink my commander, get another flood counter. Yay! Absolutely crazy. Thassa Deep Dwelling, basically a 6/5 that can be easily Devotion of Blue, equals 5, can be a creature. Indestructible, beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 target creature control, return to the battlefield under control. You can also tap down creatures for 4 mana, essentially. Yeah, basically free blink effect at the end of your turn. Speaking of which, the OG Conjurer's Closet, free blink effect at the end of the turn. Again, just get an extra flood counter, essentially. And again, if you have those doubling up effects on the ETBs, great, more flood counters. Deadeye Navigator, much more broken with much more things. Much more broken with other things like Peregrine Drake, etc. But still, like, hey, 2 mana, make a flood counter on something. That can really help you out in reducing the cost of your instants and sorceries quite a bit. Next up, other ways to play around with the number of islands you control really helps you out with Fidalcan Shackles. You can choose not to untap it if you don't want to. Pay to tap, gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to the number of islands you control as long as it remains tapped. So, again, it doesn't matter if you just have all regular islands or islands also have flood counters on them, or islands. Lands also have flood counters on them, which then become islands. It's a great way to just steal the best creature on the board, and then on your next untap step, be like, actually, there's a new better creature on the block. Go away. I untap you. You're free. Okay. Other thing. You're mine now. You're mine. Next up, Spectral Deluge. Sorcery for 6 mana, but you can foretell it for just 3. Return each creature your opponent's control toughness X less to owner's hands or X number of islands you control. Basically, Scourge of Fleets, but on a foretell spell, so this can be very beneficial to you as well. That being said, keep in mind, you might just want to cast this at sorcery speed on your turn with, the cost reduction if you already have that cost reduced, because it's going to save you mana overall. But now as this episode is coming to a close, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below about Eluge. I'm thinking of it's like Deluge, but Eluge? Eluge? Eluge. Or Eluge. I like Eluge. Eluge's funny. It's like, oh, it's Eluge. Okay, anyways. Really cool art. Really cool concept for a card. Again, one that I kind of didn't skim, but didn't fully read the last part. I don't know how I just ignored the blue. And that last part was like, yeah, cost reduction. Wait, what? Instants and sorceries reducing with the actual non-generic mana pips. Oh my goodness. Yes, please. So yeah, you can do some crazy things with this. Interesting judges out there. Please let me know about the island thing with flood counters and Quicksilver Fountain and that kind of stuff. It gets kind of weird. We shall see. Regardless, if you are interested in these cards, make sure you check out the card link in the description below. Of course, as always, stay tuned to the channel for more exciting quick takes. And as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.